It's time for the Eagles to fly. This is why the Eagles will pull off the Super Bowl upset, shock the world, and defeat the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. Gronk, spike the like button, and let's discuss why the Eagles will win the Super Bowl tomorrow. Philadelphia. Simply put, let's start it off by saying the Eagles are the more talented team. Let's face it. I've gone through the roster comparisons, position by position, unit by unit. The Philadelphia Eagles have one of the best offensive lines I've ever seen. The Eagles have one of the best running backs I've ever seen. The Eagles have one of the best defenses over the past 5 or so seasons. The Eagles have 2 number 1 receivers. The Eagles have a top 5-ish tight end in football. The Eagles have an awesome pass rush. In every single one of these categories, the Philadelphia Eagles are flat out the better team, and the stats reflect that as well. The Eagles ranked higher in DVOA. The Eagles were better on offense. The Eagles were better on defense. And the Eagles scored more points and allowed less points. It's pretty simple. The Eagles on paper are better. That's reason number 1 why the Eagles will win. And a lot of the times, we talk about the quarterbacks. And a lot of the times we talk about the coach. And that matters in the NFL more than any other position in the sport. Quarterback and coach, right? And clearly the Chiefs have that advantage over everyone in the modern NFL. And take it from a Patriots fan. New England won a lot of Super Bowls because they had a better coach and a better quarterback than every single team in the NFL for 20 years, okay? But the Philadelphia Eagles, every once in a while, there is a roster that is just so good, so dominant, so complete that they can beat anybody and they can win in any style. And in this video, we're going to continue to address all the different ways the Eagles can win this game on Sunday. And it starts at quarterback. Jalen Hurts is not a perfect player. He's far from a perfect passer. But Jalen Hurts, if I know anything about him, he's a big game player. He is a great leader. He is not phased. And he's played in plenty of big games and played well in those big games. Specifically when we're talking about playing the Kansas City Chiefs. Hurts' history versus Kansas City is really impressive when you start to dive into the numbers. First of all, if the Eagles want to win this game, I believe that Hurts needs to play well because the Eagles are 9-0 when Hurts throws for 200 passing yards. So if Hurts surpasses that number in this game, it's very likely, in fact, it's 100% right now, that the Eagles will win this game. So if you believe Hurts can get to 201 yards in this game and everything else happens like typical for the Eagles, they will win this game. You follow that up with the fact that Hurts' history versus Kansas City, the most passing yards in the regular season of his career with 387. And in the postseason with 304 yards back at Super Bowl 57. Not only did he throw for 304 in that game, but he rushed for 3 touchdowns and threw for another. And many people, not just myself, believe that he was the best player on the field. And I thought after the game, you can go all the way back and check my reaction to that game and my review. I felt like Philadelphia should have won that game. I felt like Philadelphia was the better team. I thought Philadelphia got jobbed by the refs, which does happen quite often in a Kansas City game. So let's throw that aside. But most importantly, I thought that Jalen Hurts should have won the MVP. I thought Jalen Hurts was the best player in that game. I thought Jalen Hurts should have won the MVP. I thought he played better than Patrick Mahomes. And whenever you have a quarterback that can do that, you have a chance, right? The only quarterback that has outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl is Tom Brady. And that team beat Patrick Mahomes, right? And of course, Jalen Hurts has done it once before. Can he do it again is the question. Because to me, out of all of the wins that the Chiefs have had in the Super Bowl, I think that Eagles one was probably the flukiest when you consider the punt return and when you consider a fumble return for a touchdown and when you consider that Mahomes didn't even have 200 passing yards and they had to rely on their running game. There was a lot of randomness in that game. In fact, the turf was another reason why that game went the way it did. So that was kind of the flukiest. Now, last year was pretty crazy too. I mean, the Chiefs keep getting away with it, right? Like blocked extra points. They blocked extra points, Dre Greenlaw tearing his Achilles, all the stuff that had to come into play for the Niners to lose. And the fact of the matter is, I like Brock Purdy. I think he's a good quarterback at times. I didn't mind Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Garoppolo, I wouldn't even put in Brock Purdy's stratosphere. But to me, Jalen Hurts has the capacity in his game to be above and beyond and to be heroic in a game. We've seen it before. With Brock Purdy, he's more of a product of what's around him. While Hurts does have a lot around him, he does have the physical tools to just outdo a scheme or outplay a defense. Just simply put that he can outrun you. He has a really good deep ball. He can make a number of plays in short yardage. He can just will his team in certain moments where he is very, very good. And to me, Brock Purdy didn't quite have that last year in the Super Bowl either. You kind of need that quarterback, whether cerebrally, like Tom Brady, accuracy throwing, all that sort of stuff, or you need it from a physical standpoint, right? And Purdy kind of was too young to have it cerebrally, and I don't think really has it physically. So I think Jalen Hurts, to me, is that style of quarterback that you would want in this game, despite kind of the up and down nature of his entire career, the up and down nature of this season for him, and kind of the lack of understanding of, okay, how important is he to this team this season, because he just hasn't really been needed in a lot of these games. But he's coming off the best game of his season, which I think is another really promising note, where Jalen Hurts, he was cooking from inside the pocket against the Commanders. In fact, he posted the best EPA per play of any quarterback in a playoff game this century with 20-plus dropbacks. That's an absolutely incredible stat for Jalen Hurts entering hot into the Super Bowl, okay? Now, when you get past the quarterback position, the running game for the Eagles is the best that the Chiefs have ever faced, in my opinion, in their dynasty. Saquon Barkley is on a short list of one of the most talented running backs we've ever seen enter the NFL. I think he's a future Hall of Famer, and he's currently living up to what his draft status was, right? His aura of when he was drafted was basically, this guy's the next Barry Sanders. And this season, he's lived up to that promise behind the best offensive line in the NFL. Saquon has rushed for 100 yards in 9 of his last 10 games. He's been borderline unstoppable, okay? He led the NFL, of course, in attempts, yards, and yards per game. Also, 5.8 yards per clip running the football. He can do it as a receiver if they want him to, if they want to involve him in that style of the game plan. But to me, what's so tough about the Eagles is that everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody knows what they're running. They only run about 4 or 5 different runs. They don't have a lot of versatility. This is not like Shanahan and Christian McCaffrey, where they run everything, right? And it's hard to kind of figure out the play calls. And so a great defensive coach can kind of, if you can figure out what to take away from them and what play calls will come at the right time, and you can time that and you can game plan for that, you can slow down the Niners last year. But for the Eagles' sake, they just have such a brutally dominant offensive line, a physically dominant offensive line, with a running back that, even more so than McCaffrey, I would say McCaffrey is an unguardable receiver out of the backfield. But when it comes to Saquon, his combination of vision, power, and explosiveness is extremely rare in the history of the NFL. It's on a short list with the likes of Jim Brown and Adrian Peterson and those type of guys where it's like, not only can they run you over, they can juke you out, or they can run for 60. And that's the thing about the difference between Saquon or McCaffrey is if you get past that initial stacking of the box by the Chiefs, if you can get a little bit of room to breathe, Saquon can actually take that thing the distance where it's extremely dangerous for any defense. And that means tackling is at an absolute paramount for the Kansas City Chiefs. So for me, Eagles, of course, first in EPA per rush this season. But when you counteract that with how Kansas City's played run defense, right? 19th in rush EPA and 21st in rush defense success rate over the past basically 9 games or so. Since week 10, they have really struggled against the run. And when you look at the playoffs and how they've been trending as of late, Joe Mixon rushed for 4.9 yards per carry. He had 85 yards. James Cook had 88 yards for 6.5 yards per carry. So we've seen running backs have a good deal of success, even in the playoffs against Steve Spagnuolo defenses, right? And Spagnuolo defenses are kind of known for shutting down the run in the playoffs. They have never allowed a 100-yard rusher in the history of his tenure with Kansas City in the playoffs. That's 18 games in a row, okay? So that's a crazy stat for the Chiefs. But if you just look a little bit deeper, like the Bills were really successful running the ball. The Texans were more successful than we would have thought. It was just a matter of attempts and actual workload. So if if the Eagles can get the lead, first of all, that would really help. But if Saquon just keeps getting attempts, this guy's going to break one. He's going to be able to get some damage on the ground. And the Chiefs are going to have to overcommit to stopping this special player, which they have not seen a running back like this. They have not seen an offensive line like this. They have not seen just an absolute unstoppable force in any facet of the game. I think the Eagles' running game is the most unstoppable facet of any team this season. Pass, run, doesn't matter. So it's really hard to prepare for that. And it's really hard to prepare for this offensive line, which you have Jordan Mailata, arguably the best left tackle in football. I'm not sure I would say he's the best. I think Tristan Wirfs is a little bit better personally, but I think Jordan Mailata is the best run blocker at this position. He did grade first for PFF this season, both as a run blocker and overall left tackle. And then at right tackle, you got Lane Johnson. In my opinion, one of the best right tackles of all time, and I still think he's kind of underrated right now. 5th best lineman this season at the tackle position, according to PFF. He was top 5 in run block win rate, pass block win rate. That's the only player in both those categories, according to ESPN. He also had the least double team help in the NFL. And the thing about the Eagles that's so unique is these tackles are so good that they never chip. They never help. They never have to help on a George Karlaftis at any point in this game. So they can focus all of their attention on double teaming Chris Jones and completely eliminating him from the game. When you check out the Niners in their 2 Super Bowl appearances, right? The Niners did not have the offensive line or nearly the offensive line of this Eagles team or even last Eagles team, right? Like that was the biggest issue with the Niners is as good as Shanahan's scheme is and as good as some of their playmakers are, it's just a matter of can you block Chris Jones? And oftentimes they had trouble with that. They had troubles with Spags blitzes. They just did not have the resources on the offensive line. And they kind of had the resources in other places where the Chiefs were able to overcome those. And to me, like, the Eagles, the reason they were so successful in the first Super Bowl is because of all the pass protection that Jalen Hurts was able to get, and then Hurts was able to just play at an otherworldly level for his standard. And then this time around, it's going to be really difficult for the Chiefs to achieve any sort of pass rush with 4 rushers, any sort of pass rush in a traditional sense. They're going to have to blitz to get pressure. So if the Eagles are running the ball successfully on early downs, the Chiefs may never have opportunity to actually get pressure on Jalen Hurts. And we know that the real big weakness of Jalen Hurts is that ability to play under pressure. Like that's been his biggest flaw this season. But if the Eagles completely avoid that, that's step number 1, right? You look at Mekhi Becton, Landon Dickerson, both graded as top 18 at that guard position. Dickerson in the top 5. Cam Jurgens has replaced Jason Kelce. He's 11th at center. Like, this is the best O-line in the league by far. And that's a huge reason the Eagles could very well win this game. If they can dominate the line of scrimmage, they can dominate in the running game, they can protect Jalen Hurts, if they can eat up the clock, if they can keep Mahomes on the sidelines, that is why the Eagles can win. But then when you talk about, okay, let's say Kansas City, they're selling out to stop the run, and they're doing a good job against Saquon, a better job than we would expect. Well, now you've got to deal with arguably the best wide receiver combination in the NFL. You have A.J. Brown and you have Devontae Smith. And it just feels like there's too many mismatches for any defense to deal with. And that's why you kind of think about, well, the Eagles are going to score in this game. They're going to score. They just have too many ways of scoring, especially if Jalen Hurts is playing as well as he did against the Commanders. This Eagles offense, what has made them so dangerous over the past 3 seasons at their best, is that they're the ultimate pick your poison offense. And it's not because of the scheme, it's because of the players, which makes everything so challenging, right? Like the Bengals are a good example of this. Like when I watch the Bengals passing game, I'm not wowed by their scheme. It's the players that make it so dynamic. It's Joe Burrow's timing, his accuracy, his precision. It's Jamar Chase. It's T. Higgins, right? It's these dynamic athletes. With the Eagles, it's similar in a different sense, but it's similar. It's just they're so unstoppable. It doesn't matter if you know what the play is. And that's the problem with Kansas City. That could be their problem in this game. As good as Spagnuolo's game plan could be, what if Trent McDuffie gets beat by A.J. Brown? Because the Chiefs like to press, and A.J. Brown's the best receiver against press in the NFL. If the Chiefs like to play man coverage because they want to stop Saquon and add extra bodies to the box, then A.J. Brown's the best receiver against man coverage in the NFL. 4.04 yards per route run. Like, it just doesn't matter what you do. And then on the other side of the thing is like, okay, now you've got Kansas City without L'Jarius Sneed in a big Super Bowl. And one of the reasons they won last Super Bowl is because they played man coverage against the Niners a ton, like more than they had all season. And that allowed them to do a good job against McCaffrey. But the difference here with the Eagles is the Eagles attack the run game from more of a 3-receiver personnel, and the Niners attack it from a fullback on the field, right? So that fullback in Kyle Juszczyk, good athlete for the position, but he's not really routing you up and catching 8 passes a game. You know, so it's a different way to attack. At the same time, we had those weaknesses on the O-line with the Niners that we don't have with the Eagles. At the same time, you've got the quarterback run threat of Jalen Hurts that you didn't have with Brock Purdy. So there's so many different dimensions, in my opinion, that from a personnel standpoint, the Eagles have the advantage that the Niners didn't really have. Like the Niners just had a schematical edge. And when they're schematically met, that is where they could lose, right? And that's what we saw in the Super Bowl. Now, when it comes to Devontae Smith, you have a player that could have a clear mismatch against one of the worst teams against the slot receiver. This season, the Chiefs allowed the highest yards per route run, as I choke over my own spit. They allow the highest yards per route run to the wide receiver in the slot this season, and they allowed the 3rd highest completion percentage as well at this position. And Devontae Smith did see a 68% clip in the conference championship playing from the slot position. He has had a 99-yard game and a 100-yard game against the Chiefs, so he has proven to be a problem against this team. A.J. Brown did not play well last year in this matchup. He played really well in the Super Bowl. He caught a long touchdown, all that stuff. But because they took away A.J. Brown, and remember, they didn't have the element of Saquon last year, so it kind of changes how you can really play defense. But Devontae Smith was still able to go off. Now, if for some reason they can slow down one of A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, which you would give credit to Spags to be able to do that. They do have Trent McDuffie, one of the best corners in the NFL. Okay, so one of these guys is likely to have a good game. But the other guy that makes it so challenging is Dallas Goedert, because Dallas Goedert is low-key one of the best tight ends in football. He did lead the NFL against man coverage at this position with a 3.62 yards per route run. He also had 6 catches for 60 yards in Super Bowl 57. And the Chiefs already struggle against tight ends. They allowed the most yards to tight ends and the 4th most catches. So again, back to the point of like, this is the ultimate pick your poison offense. If the Chiefs want to play with 3 linebackers, and if the Chiefs want to stack the box, and if the Chiefs want to play the run more than the pass, then ultimately the Eagles are going to find their matchups and they're going to make the Chiefs pay, and perhaps that leads to more explosiveness on the outside. As long as Jalen is making the right decisions with the ball and not holding the ball, I think the Eagles can be fine in attacking in this facet. If the Eagles are playing against the Chiefs defense that they decide to play more 2-deep style, and they want to kind of allow the Eagles to go on long drives by running the football, and they're going to tighten up in the red zone, well, then the Eagles can run the clock. The Eagles can run the ball. And even if the Chiefs decide to stack the box, I'm not so convinced that they'll even stop Saquon anyways. So it's going to be a really hard game plan for the Chiefs to kind of figure out. And how much man will they play? How much will they blitz? The main thing the Eagles have to do to avoid losing is they have to avoid those situations where Steve Spagnuolo is being able to blitz Jalen Hurts, because that's the only real disadvantage I see on this side of the football. And when you talk about it too, when we talk about the ultimate pick your poison, I mean, the Chiefs really haven't played two receivers of this caliber all season. They have not played Cincinnati with both receivers. They only played Jamar Chase. They didn't play Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They actually played neither. They played the Niners with no Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk got hurt in like the first quarter. Baltimore does not have that type of receiving core. Buffalo does not have that type of receiving core. So really, this is a test that the Chiefs have not seen all year. So we're ultimately going to get that answer of whether or not they should have moved on from L'Jarius Sneed, or it might actually cost them a Super Bowl. Now, when we flip the sides of the football in terms of why the Eagles can win this game, the best defense in the league definitely helps, in my opinion. And it's not only is it the best defense in the league, because sometimes you can have the best defense in the league, but the matchup that you face in the Super Bowl isn't exactly the best for you. Like, for example, Tom Brady against the Legion of Boom in Super Bowl 49. Probably the last quarterback the Seahawks wanted to face in that game was Tom Brady. Despite Aaron Rodgers, winning the MVP that season, they did an absolutely incredible job at smothering Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship because of the style of player and the style of offense that they ran. But when it came to New England and Tom Brady, he was able to find ways to attack that defense and kind of shred them, right? But not only are the Eagles the best defense in the league, but they do match up with the Chiefs actually really well, which is something that I think is really unique, because the Niners have had, especially that 2019 team, they had a really great defense that year. And even the Eagles in 2021, they had a really great defense that year. But the style of defense that they had was not actually a good defense to play against Mahomes or play against the Chiefs, right? So when we dive into this a little bit, the Eagles, they were obviously great on defense, tied for first in success rate overall, second in pass defense success rate. And one of the most impressive stats that I found was that the Eagles, playing nickel at the second highest rate, they allowed the fewest yards per play in the next-gen era, only 4.2 yards per play since week 5 when they started Cooper DeJean at the nickel spot. So this is not only a good defense, this is potentially one of the best defenses of this era, especially if they go on to play an extremely good game. Now, diving deeper into why they're a tough matchup for the Chiefs, the Eagles allowed the lowest yards per catch to the tight end position. Travis Kelce, Noah Gray. Even if the Chiefs want to go out there and they want to get a little bit of a ground game going against the soft box of the Eagles, and they want to try to attack that area, and they want to be able to throw to their tight ends. Well, the Eagles have proven statistically that they can defend a guy like Travis Kelce, or they can defend the tight end position. Then you throw in the fact that the Chiefs are very, very centered on throwing the ball short, and the Eagles are the best defense at defending short passes. Mahomes has targeted receivers behind the line of scrimmage at a 27% rate, resulting in 851 passing yards. It's the second most in the NFL, and a league-high 45 first downs. He has accounted for 5 of the 6 seasons since 2016 in this regard, throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. This is a very big part of the Chiefs' offense, especially this season, and how they're able to matriculate the ball downfield and how they're so successful on third down, because they're always in third and manageable, and that's where Mahomes can really kill you and break your back. But the Eagles' defense allowed the fewest yards per attempt and the lowest success rate on passes behind the line of scrimmage. They also allowed the lowest yards after catch over expected, and the Chiefs are the most reliant team on yak in the NFL at 61.5%. So as long as the Eagles tackle and the Eagles are in position to make those plays on those passes, the Eagles should force more second and third and longs than the average team does against Kansas City, because they're typically very good. Now, you throw in the fact that if the Eagles are this successful against that style of attack, then that will allow their pass rush to feast against perhaps the biggest weakness on the Chiefs roster, which is the offensive line. The reason the Chiefs have oriented and shifted their offense towards this style is because their O-line is not very good and they need to get rid of the ball. But if they're in second or third and long, that's where you have the best interior pass rush in football from Philadelphia. First in pass rush grade, second in pressure percentage, first in win rate. And you're talking about a Joe Thuney now moving from left guard to left tackle, where the Chiefs were the best team at protecting on the interior before the move. Now they're only 19th since the move on the interior. And something we haven't really seen from the teams that have played the Chiefs is a dynamic interior rush, right? The Texans, as good as their defense is, they're more edge-centric. The Bills don't really have a great pass rush in general. And a lot of the teams the Chiefs have played, they don't have a great interior rush. That being said, Milton Williams could have a huge advantage here. He'll play a lot of Mike Caliendo, who's the backup left guard. Milton Williams was second in pass rush grade. He has 10 pressures in the playoffs. He was tied for the second most in these playoffs so far with Chris Jones. Caliendo was not good against Buffalo. He allowed a sack. He allowed 10 pressures in the game. Oliver had two hits. Jordan Phillips also had a sack in that game. Then you throw in Jalen Carter, arguably the best player on the Eagles, not named Saquon Barkley. In the playoffs, he had 20 pressures, 9 more than second place. He's one of the best D tackles in football. He's probably top 3 at this position alongside Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence, right? Jordan Davis is playing better than ever as a pass rusher, a 90.1 pass rush grade in the playoffs. Ajomo had 31 pressures in the regular season at D tackle, an 82.6 pass rush grade in the regular season. They've got 4 different guys that can rush the quarterback from the defensive tackle position. They have one of the best D tackles in the NFL, one that can rival Chris Jones. They have a very good number 2 that's going to get paid this offseason. If there is an interior rush that can disrupt Patrick Mahomes and force him into pressure along the edges and also just make him uncomfortable about stepping up and stepping around pressure, it's going to be this interior defensive line. And you look at the edges. Okay, Nolan Smith is playing incredible. He has 15 pressures and 4 sacks in the playoffs, and he lines up on the left against Jawan Taylor. Jawan Taylor struggles against quicker, bendier pass rushers like Nolan Smith typically. Why does he always false start? Because he's always trying to get the edge in terms of quickness, right? That's why he's always false starting. That's why he's always trying to get that quick step. But if you're able to, get to his back shoulder, you can beat him. At the same time, Nolan Smith's incredibly fast. So containing Mahomes, it's also important for him to be able to do that. He can run down Mahomes potentially on a few plays. Josh Sweat led the team in pressures with 54, had 8 sacks in the regular season. And he is the longer, more physical, more powerful pass rusher. He'll take on Joe Thuney, who's got shorter arms, and Joe Thuney is a guard. So that's also a challenging matchup on paper for Joe Thuney, having to play the position he's not natural at. And then you've got Hunt, who also has looked pretty good in these playoffs as a young player. So the pass rush, if the Eagles are stopping the short passes, if the Eagles are playing their typical style of run defense, which is second in the NFL in success rate, they're going to be able to put the Chiefs in more down and distance situations that they haven't seen all season, which is going to result in more pressure on Mahomes, more sacks, and potentially more bad plays. At the same time, Burks is that player that I think the Chiefs will try to target, as they did in the Super Bowl with the 49ers last year. But Burks has actually played pretty well. He does have a 74 coverage grade, and he has the most pass play stops in the playoffs at linebacker, taking over for Nakobe Dean. The secondary, in my opinion, might be the difference between Super Bowl 57's result and Super Bowl 59's result, right? The Chiefs are just 19 and 15 when Mahomes holds the ball for an average of 3 seconds. And that's all a result of coverage. That's all a result of a secondary. If you can disrupt his first read, if you can play tight coverage on the outside and make him hold the ball, it's a lot more challenging for the Chiefs to move and matriculate the ball and actually win. The only time that Mahomes lost this season, it was against Buffalo when they made him hold the ball for an average of 3.35 seconds. So that's definitely a huge factor here. Can the Eagles with Quinyon, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean, and CJ Gardner-Johnson and those guys, Reed Blankenship, can they play better than the 57 unit did with James Bradbury and how much he struggled and Gannon's scheme that day? Can they play better in this one, which they should be able to. And the final reason I feel like defensively and overall the Eagles can definitely win Super Bowl 59 is that Vic Fangio gives them a familiarity that is rare against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And not only is he familiar, but he's successful. When you look at the last 4 games against Patrick Mahomes, he has held him to 225 yards per game, under a 60% completion percentage, only 5 touchdowns in 4 games, and only 19 points per game. And you throw in a couple of extra statistics here. The Chiefs are only hitting at a 38% goal-to-go touchdown rate versus Vic Fangio's defenses, when against the average defense, they're at 79% compared to 38% against Fangio. Mahomes has never thrown more than 2 touchdowns in 9 games against Vic Fangio's defense. He only has 10 touchdowns in 8 games. And this season, Patrick Mahomes is one of the worst quarterbacks on third down against quarters coverage and cover 6, which are the 2 main staples of Fangio's defense. That is rare because Mahomes is the best third down quarterback in the league. So typically he succeeds against cover 2 or cover 1 or cover 3 or the blitz. But quarters coverage, cover 6, those drop quite a bit. So I just went through it, guys. Like offensively, defensively, honestly, statistically, competitively from a roster standpoint, the Eagles are the better team. The Eagles match up exceptionally with the Chiefs. And if there is a team over the last couple of years that can beat them, I think it's this team. So you guys let me know what you thought in the comments and what you think about this game. Final thoughts. That is why I think the Eagles can pull off the upset in Super Bowl 59 and shock the world. Fly, Eagles, fly. Gronk spiked the like button. And thanks for watching. Peace.